Good morning and welcome back to Morning Live. A final look now at your sports news for today. Now, this weekend, the world champions will be taking on a struggling All Black side at the Mbombela Stadium and will be looking to launch their high ball offense. Now, to help us bring context to the enormity of what many see as the biggest rivalry in world rugby, we have roped in Khanyiso Tshwaku, Sport 24 senior sports journalist and SABC sports commentator as well as analyst. He's been driving up and down the province of Mpumalanga, analysing these two teams like a hawk. Good morning, Khanyiso. Thank you so much for joining us on Sports on Morning Live.
Good morning, Vutsu, and good morning to the viewers.
Khanyiso, let's start with where the All Blacks team is at the moment. We know that they had that series lost against the Irish, so not really at their best in terms of performance. On the other side, the Springboks have a little bit of a bounce in their step given that victory over Wales, albeit not in the manner that they envisaged.
Look, I mean, New Zealand are on a run of 4 losses in 5 tests. I mean, and it's unprecedented for the All Blacks. I mean, the last time that happened was back in 1998. Remember, in 1998, they lost 5 consecutive test matches. So, I mean, that's put Ian Foster under significant pressure leading into this test. And you can sense from how he's speaking that he's trying to damp down the kind of pressure that he's under. Also, you'd find that the conversations between the coaches have been very magnanimous in that when you speaking to Jacques now on Tuesday, at the team announcement, he says every coach is under pressure. Every coach is pretty much only 2 test matches away from being fired. And I think when we were at Ian Foster's press conference yesterday, you could sense that there was a fair bit of pressure. But look, again, it's a key set of results that will take place over the next 2 weeks, starting tomorrow at the Mbombela Stadium. Because if you look at the fact that the All Blacks have yet to lose South Africa since 2014, so the pressure does get transferred a bit to the host. So South Africa have a lot to lose and a lot to gain from tomorrow's test, because if they win tomorrow, that'll be 5 out of 6 test loss by the All Blacks. That'll ratchet up the pressure for Ian Foster and some of his assistants. We'll remember that after the Ireland series, they got rid of John Plumtree and they got rid of Brad Moore. So look, there is pressure for not only the All Blacks but for the Springboks, because I mean, speaking to Patrick Lambie yesterday, he also said that this is probably the best chance that the Springboks have had of beating the All Blacks in consecutive test matches. I mean, the last time they did it at home was back in 2009, and remember in that particular junction they also had 2 consecutive tests, which they won in Bloemfontein and in Durban. So look, I mean, it's there for the Springboks to gain, but it's also there for the Springboks to lose.
Now, Khanyiso, you've already touched on this a little bit, but both coaches have come under criticism for a number of different reasons. But what are your thoughts on John Plumtree being the fall guy for the All Blacks? Was that the right decision?
It's tough because whenever someone loses, there's always a decision that needs to be taken by management when they say that so-and-so needs to be seen to be responsible for a particular decision and so-and-so needs to be responsible. I mean, when you look at the particular performance against Ireland, I mean, New Zealand's line out in New Zealand's maul fell to pieces, especially in the third test, and that was John Plumtree's area of expertise. And that is a part of New Zealand's rugby that has generally actually been able to hold the fort for them, especially under the Stephen Hansen and the Graham Henry era. So for them to have their maul and the lineup fall apart, someone has to take the fall for that. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the coach. I mean, remember that after that particular test match when they lost in Wellington, Ian Foster wasn't put up for a press conference the following day. And actually, there was a radio silence from New Zealand rugby from the rest of that particular week. So that displayed the amount of pressure that they had to deal with in that test. So, look, it's going to be tricky now to see what Jason Ryan comes up with. Look, and I think if that particular department doesn't work for New Zealand, look, it's going to be very tricky for them going to Ellis Park next week.
Indeed, I want to now move the conversation more to the South African point of view. Curtly Arendse, what an exciting talent to watch, and he's got so much talent. But I want to touch on, has the South African team missed a bit of a trick with the international development of Aphelele Fassi? Have Jacques Ninaba and his team been too conservative in their approach?
Look, I mean, they've made it clear that they have a particular approach in terms of how they select players. When they look at a Curtly Arendse, they have a player that they feel that is actually a bit like a Cheslin Colby. Look, you cannot you cannot replicate a player, that goes without saying. But also they have particular preferences for particular players in particular positions. When Apelele Fassi plays for the Springboks, he plays at left wing, was probably as a fullback should the need arise. I mean, remember that Kirtley Arons also plays fullback and right wing for the Bulls. So I think they've picked based on what they've seen in particular players. I mean, there's nothing wrong that Apelele Fassi did in that Wales test. I mean, he actually every test match that he's played. But I think at this point in time, they see a particular role for an Apelele Fassi that for this particular test actually doesn't quite, for the series, haven't quite envisaged for him. I suspect that should there be another injury, let's say at wing, touch wood, there isn't another injury at wing, because the last thing you want is for players to get injured, especially the Springbok players. I suspect that there could and should be a role for him, because when you look at what they want at fullback they want players who can double up as a double pivot, which is why David Willemse has been starting test matches regularly ahead of Villa, because they're able to double up at 10 and at 15. So they are very particular with what they want in particular positions. So I think there's no slight in the Pelele's ability, but maybe there's a particular box he may not tick for the Springbok management at this point in time that maybe he just needs to work on when it comes to playing for the Sharks in the URC that starts later next month.
And when you look at this coaching staff at the Springboks, have they been given the credit that is due to them in terms of what they've managed to achieve in the time that they've been in charge? I mean, we are looking at a Springbok side that seem to be serious contenders for the Rugby World Cup in France.
Oh, they are. I think the one criticism that they generally get is that the Springboks aren't as accurate as one would have liked them to be. I mean, the 22, if you look at example in the Wales series, they got into the 22 a number of times, but only had didn't have, let's say, double-digit tries to show for the efforts across the three test matches. And what Wales did, particularly well, was when they got into the 22, they made use of the opportunities. I think that's the one thing that the Bok management has been taking slight criticism for. I think it's something that they've understood that they've been criticized. They haven't taken it personally. They've understood that when you play against a team like All Blacks, you're not going to get a lot of opportunities in the 22. So when you do get them, you need to make the most of them. And I think that's what they did, especially in the second test last year when they played in Gold Coast, where they got in 22. They made the most of the opportunities. I think what becomes important now is that they sharpen up on their attack. And I hope that, the training sessions, because remember that you aren't always able to view the entire training sessions. Want to hope that they've used the past 2 weeks to sharpen up on the attack, to sharpen up on how they finish, because creating opportunities isn't an issue for them, it's finishing them. And I think that's been a slight criticism, and I hope that for this particular series, once they get into New Zealand 22, they make the most of it, because if there's one thing that the All Blacks are never lacking in, despite the state that they find themselves in, is their ability to finish opportunities when they get into the 22.
And finally, Khanyiso, as I wrap up with you, tomorrow's encounter, to kick or not to kick, do you starve the All Blacks of possession and you retain it as much as possible, or do we take the approach of wanting to kick for territory and then tackling them into submission?
Look, it's going to be tricky, because if you look at how Ireland played, Ireland actually starved New Zealand position. But I think the thing with rugby is that it's not about how much position you have. It's about what you do with the position in the key areas. So you may kick the skin off the board, but if you're not using it effectively when you get into the 22, look, then you're pretty much wasting your time on the field. So you may have as much ball as you want, but if you're not using it effectively in key areas, it pretty much defeats the purpose. So the Boks should have, if they have 60% possession, if they're using 50% of it in the All Blacks 22 and converting into opportunities, I mean that for them would be that for them would be gold dust, even if they have, let's say, 40% of the possession. But if they have the ball, they get into New Zealand 22 and they make it count and they score. Then even if they play without the ball, then look, at the end of the day, it's similar to soccer. You may have all the possession you want. It's what you do with it in the red zone that matters the most.
Khanyiso, just the name of the team who's winning tomorrow.
Oh, I'm not good with making predictions, but I'll give it to South Africa by 3 points.
Thank you so much for your time here this morning, Khanyiso.